The footsteps started at exactly 3:17 p.m. Heavy, deliberate, coming from directly above my head. Harold had been dead for 3 days. I dropped his favorite flannel shirt back into the donation box and stared at the ceiling. Thump, thump, thump. Someone was pacing back and forth in our attic, the same attic Harold always claimed was just empty space, Martha. Nothing up there but dust and old Christmas decorations. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking like a teenager's. Silence. Then more footsteps. I'd lived in this house for 28 years. I knew every creak, every settling sound, every pipe that groaned in the winter. This wasn't the house. This was someone walking around up there like they owned the place. My hands trembled as I reached for my cell phone. Who was I going to call? The police? "Hello, officer. I think someone's in my attic, but my husband just died and I might be losing my mind." Thump, thump, thump. That's it. I marched into the hallway and yanked on the thin rope hanging from the ceiling. The wooden ladder unfolded with a screech that made me wince. When was the last time anyone had used this thing? The ladder wobbled under my weight. 68 years old and climbing into an attic like some kind of detective. Harold would have laughed himself sick. Would have, Martha. Would have. He's gone. The musty smell hit me first, old wood, and something else. Something sharp and chemical. Then my eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the small circular window, and I saw what Harold had been hiding from me for God knows how long. It wasn't empty space. It was an office. A real office, complete with a heavy oak desk, 2 black filing cabinets, and a leather chair that looked more expensive than anything we had downstairs. Cork boards covered every inch of the slanted walls, and they were covered with, oh my God, wedding photos. Dozens of them, pinned up like butterflies in a collection. Bride after bride, all smiling in white dresses, all holding bouquets, all looking blissfully happy on what should have been the best day of their lives. Some were recent color photos, others were yellowed black and white shots from decades ago. And there, in the center of the wall, like some kind of sick centerpiece, was my own wedding photo from 1982. I was 26 in that picture, radiant, convinced I'd won the lottery when Harold proposed after only 3 months of dating. My mother had warned me about rushing into marriage. "Martha, you barely know this man." "I know enough, Mom. I know he loves me." Looking at my younger self now, surrounded by all these other brides, I felt something cold crawl up my spine. How many of these women had Harold told the same lies? How many had believed they were special? I stumbled backward, knocking into the desk. A small framed photo fell over Harold with his arm around a brunette I'd never seen before. She was laughing, her head thrown back, completely at ease. On the back, someone had written in Harold's unmistakable handwriting, "Susan, Phase 2 complete." Phase 2? My legs felt weak. I gripped the edge of the desk and forced myself to look closer at the corkboards. Each photo had a small index card pinned beneath it. Names, dates, and in some cases, red stamps that made my blood freeze. Eliminated. 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 "What the hell were you doing up here, Harold?" The silence felt different now. Heavier. Like the walls themselves were holding secrets. I turned to the filing cabinets. The top drawer of the first one was slightly open, as if someone had left in a hurry. My hands shook as I pulled it wider. Manila folders. Dozens of them. Each labeled with a woman's name in Harold's precise block letters. Chen. Margaret. Davidson. Ruth. Flores. Elena. Martinez. Martha. My folder was thick. Thicker than the others. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and loose papers scattered across the desk. Bank statements, insurance policies, medical records. My medical records. "When did you get these?" I whispered to the empty room. But Harold wasn't there to answer. He was 6 feet underground in Riverside Cemetery, right where I'd watched them lower his casket 3 days ago. Right where I'd thrown dirt on his coffin and promised to love his memory forever. I opened the Martinez folder wider. The first page was a typewritten summary that made my stomach turn. Subject: Martha Martinez, née Patterson. Age: 68. Married: 28 years. Assets: $340,000, house, plus savings, plus life insurance. Vulnerabilities: isolated, no close family, trusting nature. Status: long-term project. Long-term project: 28 years of marriage, 28 years of cooking his dinners, washing his clothes, believing his lies about working late and weekend fishing trips. 28 years of being someone's project. I flipped to the next page and found something that made the room spin around me. A detailed timeline of our entire relationship. Our first date, our first kiss, the night he proposed, our wedding, every anniversary, every vacation, every fight, every reconciliation. All of it documented like scientific observations. Month 3. Subject agrees to marriage proposal. Emotional attachment confirmed. Year 1. Subject demonstrates complete trust. Security protocols unnecessary. Year 15. Subject shows signs of suspicion regarding evening activities. Recommend increased attention divided by gifts. Year 20. Subject's mother dies. Isolation now complete. Subject fully dependent. I was going to be sick. With shaking hands, I reached for the next file in the cabinet. Chen, Margaret. It was thinner than mine, and when I opened it, I understood why. Margaret Chen had been eliminated. The folder contained newspaper clippings. Local woman dies in apparent accident. Widow's fatal fall ruled accidental. No foul play suspected in Chen death. But the last page in Margaret's file wasn't a newspaper clipping. It was Harold's handwriting again. Phase 4 complete. Asset liquidation successful. Total: $89,000. And at the bottom of the page, stamped in red ink like a grade on a school paper, was that word that made everything clear. Eliminated. I couldn't stop opening files. Even though each one made me sicker. Even though my hands were shaking so hard I could barely read Harold's neat handwriting. Margaret Chen wasn't the only one. The second filing cabinet was stuffed full. 32 folders. All women's names, all arranged alphabetically like some kind of sick library system. I pulled them out in handfuls, papers scattering across the desk like evidence from a crime scene. Because that's exactly what this was. Adams, Beverly status, discarded. Beverly's folder was thin. Just a few photos and a single page of notes. Subject too suspicious. Asks too many questions about finances. Recommend termination of contact before Phase 2. There was a photo of Beverly clipped to the inside cover. She looked like she was in her 50s, sitting at what appeared to be a coffee shop, laughing at something off camera. She had no idea someone was documenting her like a lab rat. Collins. Diane. Status: ongoing. Diane's folder was thicker. Bank statements, credit reports, a copy of her divorce decree. And Harold's notes, written in that methodical style I was beginning to recognize. Phase 2 initiated. Subject believes relationship is exclusive. Emotional dependency increasing. Recommend Phase 3 within 6 months. The timestamp was from 2 months ago. 2 months ago, while I was planning Harold's surprise birthday party, he was planning to bilk some poor woman named Diane out of her divorce settlement. "You son of a bitch," I whispered. Edwards. Patricia. DADA. Status: eliminated. My stomach clenched. Another red stamp. Another dead woman. Patricia's file was horrifyingly thorough. Photos of her house, copies of her will, medical records showing she had a heart condition, and Harold's final entry, dated just 18 months ago. Phase 4 complete. Digitalis successfully administered via daily medications. Death appears natural cardiac event during sleep. Asset transfer complete. $127,000. Digitalis. I'd heard of that. Wasn't it a heart medication that could be fatal in large doses? I dropped Patricia's file and grabbed another one. Foster. Helen Faye's status. Eliminated. Garcia. Rosario. Status. Eliminated. Holloway. June. Status. Eliminated. The red stamps blurred together. How many women had Harold killed? How many lonely widows and divorcees had trusted him with their hearts, their homes, their bank accounts, their lives? 15 years, I said aloud, my voice echoing in the cramped attic space. He's been doing this for 15 years, and I'd been married to him for 28. Which meant for the first 13 years of our marriage, Harold had been a normal husband. Boring, maybe. A little distant, but normal. What had changed? What had turned him into? This? I thought about our life together. Really thought about it for the first time in years. When had Harold started working late so often? When had those mysterious weekend fishing trips begun? When had he started keeping separate bank accounts for business purposes? Around year 15 of our marriage. Right after my mother died and left me a small inheritance. Oh, God. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was his first victim, but I hadn't been eliminated. Why? I pulled out my own folder again, this time reading more carefully. The answer was right there in Harold's clinical notes. Year 16. Subject's inheritance successfully transferred to joint account. However, subject's trusting nature and isolated lifestyle make her ideal long-term cover. Recommend maintaining relationship while pursuing additional targets. Year 18. Subject's presence provides perfect alibi for evening activities. Other subjects believe I am happily married and therefore trustworthy. Year 22. Subject useful for social introductions. Befriends other widows at church, senior center. Excellent source of new targets. I wasn't Harold's wife. I was his hunting dog. His bait. His perfect cover story. Ladies, meet my wife Martha. We've been happily married for decades. You can trust me. I'm a family man. How many women had I unknowingly delivered into his hands? How many times had I introduced him to lonely widows at church functions, bridge games, charity events? Mrs. Patterson from the senior center. She'd been so excited when Harold offered to help her with her taxes last year. I'd encouraged her to accept his help. She'd died 3 months later, peaceful in her sleep, the obituary had said. My legs gave out. I collapsed into Harold's desk chair and stared at the wall of wedding photos. All these women, smiling and hopeful on their wedding days, not knowing they were marrying their killer. But some of the photos weren't wedding pictures. Some were just candid shots. Women at restaurants, at parks, getting into cars, surveillance photos, and in the corner of the corkboard, partially hidden behind other papers, I spotted something that made my blood freeze. It was a photo of me, recent, maybe from last week. I was coming out of the grocery store, arms full of bags, completely unaware someone was watching me. Someone was still watching me. Harold was dead, but someone had been in this attic 3 days after his funeral. Someone had been up here, walking around, going through his files. I started opening drawers frantically. The desk was full of Harold's supplies. Cameras, recording devices, small bottles labeled with chemical names I didn't recognize, and in the bottom drawer, a manila envelope that made my heart stop. Martha's final phase was written across the front in Harold's handwriting. But the date underneath wasn't in Harold's handwriting. It was different. Newer. Today's date. No, I whispered, tearing open the envelope. No, no, no. Inside was a detailed plan. Floor plans of our house. My daily routine, mapped out hour by hour. Photos of me sleeping, taken through our bedroom window. and a step-by-step guide for staging what the papers described as subject's grief-induced cardiac event. The plan was sickeningly thorough. How to make my death look like I died of a broken heart. How to access my accounts. How to liquidate my assets. Even a timeline, everything was supposed to happen within the week. But this wasn't Harold's work. Harold was dead. At the bottom of the page, in that unfamiliar handwriting, was a note that made me realize I was still in terrible danger. H's death accelerated timeline. Subject becoming suspicious. Recommend immediate implementation. R. The footsteps started again, right above my head. I stuffed the Martha's final phase envelope into my sweater and backed toward the attic ladder. Someone was up here with me. Someone who had been watching me read Harold's files. "Hello, Martha." I spun around and nearly fell backward through the attic opening. Detective Ray Morrison emerged from the shadows behind the filing cabinets, his police badge catching the dim light. Ray, who'd been so kind at Harold's funeral. Ray, who'd helped carry the casket. Ray, who'd hugged me and promised to check on me during this difficult time. "Ray?" My voice came out as a squeak. "What are you doing in my attic?" He smiled, but it wasn't the comforting smile I remembered from 3 days ago. This smile was cold, clinical. The same smile Harold used to give me when he thought I was being particularly naive. "I've been waiting for you to find Harold's little office," Ray said, stepping closer. "Though I have to say, you took longer than we expected. Harold always said you weren't the brightest bulb." "We?" Ray gestured at the corkboards covered in wedding photos. "Harold and I, partners for almost 8 years now. A very profitable partnership, until your husband went and had an actual heart attack." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "You were in on it. All of it." "I was more than in on it, Martha. I was the backbone of the operation." Ray pulled out his phone and started scrolling through what looked like a contact list. "Who do you think made sure the deaths were never investigated too closely? Who do you think falsified the autopsy reports? You're a police detective." "Exactly. Which made me invaluable. Harold found the marks, gained their trust, eliminated them. I made sure their deaths stayed off the radar." He looked up from his phone. "It was a beautiful system." "Was?" "Well, Harold's inconvenient death has created some complications. He was supposed to fake his death and disappear with our accumulated assets. Instead, he actually died, and now I'm stuck cleaning up his mess." I backed toward the ladder again. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't." Ray sighed like he was explaining something to a child. "Harold was getting tired of keeping you around. You were becoming a liability. Too many questions about his evening activities, too much curiosity about his business trips. The plan was for him to die in that car accident we arranged, then resurface in Costa Rica with a new identity and our retirement fund. But he really died. Massive coronary, right there in the funeral home while we were staging his body. Ironic, really. All those years of poisoning other people's hearts, and his own finally gave out." Ray shook his head. The funeral director assumed Harold had just passed out from the formaldehyde fumes. By the time anyone realized he was actually dead, it was too late to change the plan. My mind reeled. So the funeral was real? Oh yes. We had to bury him for real, which left me with a problem. Ray started moving closer again. Harold took our access codes, our offshore account information, and our entire client list to the grave with him. 8 years of work, millions of dollars, all locked away in Harold's paranoid little brain. Client list? You didn't think we were doing this for fun, did you? We had customers, Martha. People who wanted their inconvenient relatives dead but didn't want to get their hands dirty. Wealthy heirs, bitter ex-spouses, greedy business partners. We provided a service. The room started spinning. You killed people for money. We eliminated problems. Very discreetly, very profitably. Ray was close enough now that I could see the cold calculation in his eyes. But with Harold gone, I need those account numbers. I need that client list. And I need to tie up loose ends. I don't know anything about Harold's business? Maybe. But you're still the biggest liability I have left. The grieving widow who might start asking too many questions. The woman who knows Harold better than anyone else. The wife who might stumble across evidence. Like I just had. Besides, Ray continued, pulling something from his jacket pocket. You were always scheduled for elimination anyway. Harold just kept putting it off because you were useful. But your usefulness has expired. The something in his hand was a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. And next to it, a syringe. What is that? Harold's favorite cocktail. Digitalis mixed with potassium chloride mimics a natural heart attack perfectly. Undetectable in standard autopsies, especially when the investigating detective is cooperative. I pressed myself against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. The attic ladder was behind Ray now, and the slanted ceiling made it impossible to stand up straight. The beauty of this particular combination, Ray said, drawing the liquid into the syringe, is that it works fast. You'll be unconscious in seconds, dead in minutes. And when they find your body downstairs tomorrow morning, it'll look exactly like what everyone expects. A widow who died of grief. People will ask questions. What people? You have no close family. No real friends. Your neighbors barely know you exist. Harold made sure of that over the years, kept you isolated, dependent, alone. Ray tested the syringe, a small drop of poison beating at the tip. The perfect victim. Ray, please. I won't tell anyone. I'll keep quiet. I know you will. He stepped closer, holding the syringe like a weapon. You'll be very, very quiet. I could smell his cologne now. The same cologne he'd worn to Harold's funeral while he comforted me and promised to look after me. Had he already been planning my death then? One quick injection, Ray said softly. Right into the neck. You'll barely feel it, and then all this unpleasantness will be over. The syringe gleamed in the dim attic light. Ray's badge gleamed too, a mockery of everything I'd been taught to trust and respect. Any last words, Martha? Harold always liked to give them a chance for last words. Wait, I gasped, pressing my hand to my chest. I can't breathe. My knees buckled and I slumped against Harold's desk, making sure to fall toward the drawer I'd seen earlier, the one with Harold's supplies. Oh, come on, Martha. Ray rolled his eyes. The dramatic collapse? Really? Harold said you were more original than this. But he lowered the syringe slightly, just enough. My fingers found the desk drawer handle behind my back. Harold's letter opener, the same brass blade he'd used to slice open all those victim files, was right where I remembered it. Please, I wheezed, really selling the performance. My heart. I think I'm having a heart attack. You're about to. Ray knelt beside me, syringe raised. This will only hurt for a second. The moment he leaned in, I struck. Harold's letter opener went straight into Ray's shoulder. He screamed and jerked backward, the syringe flying from his hand and shattering against the corkboard. Poison splattered across the wedding photos. You crazy bitch. Ray lunged at me, blood streaming down his arm. But the cramped attic space worked against him. His head smacked into a low beam, and I rolled away toward the ladder opening. Help! I screamed at the top of my lungs. Help me! There's a killer in my house! Ray grabbed my ankle, trying to drag me back. Nobody's coming, Martha! Nobody cares about you! But he was wrong. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Beautiful, life-saving sirens. What? Ray's face went white. How did you... I called 911 when I first heard footsteps up here, I panted. Before I climbed up, I may be old, Ray, but I'm not stupid. That was a lie. I hadn't called anyone. But Ray didn't know that, and the sirens were definitely real. Someone else must have heard me screaming. Ray's grip on my ankle tightened. Then we both go down. I'll tell them you killed Harold, that you've been running this whole operation. With what evidence? I kicked at his hand with my free foot. Your word against a grieving widow's. I'm a detective. You're a murderer. Ray hauled himself up, using my leg for leverage. Blood from his shoulder wound was making everything slippery. His face was twisted with rage and desperation. If I'm going down, he snarled, you're coming with me. He lunged forward, but his injured shoulder threw off his balance. I rolled to the side, and Ray's momentum carried him straight toward the open attic hatch. For a moment, he teetered on the edge, arms windmilling wildly. Then he fell. The crash echoed through the entire house, Ray's body hitting the hardwood floor below with a sound I'll never forget. The sirens were right outside now, blue and red lights flashing through the windows. I crawled to the edge of the opening and looked down. Ray wasn't moving. Police! Open up! Real police. Not Ray's corrupted version, but actual officers who might listen to the truth. I scrambled back to Harold's desk, hands shaking as I searched through the drawers. There had to be something. Some evidence that would prove what Ray had just confessed to me. That's when I found it. Hidden in a secret compartment behind the bottom drawer was a small digital recorder, still running. The red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Harold, you paranoid bastard. With trembling fingers, I rewound the device and hit play. Asterisk, Harold and I, partners for almost 8 years now. A very profitable partnership. Asterisk. Ray's voice filled the attic, confessing to everything. The murders, the cover-ups, the client list, Harold's staged death that went wrong. All of it recorded. Asterisk. We had customers, Martha. People who wanted their inconvenient relatives dead but didn't want to get their hands dirty. Asterisk. Police. Is anyone in there? I clutched the recorder and made my way carefully down the ladder. Ray was sprawled on the hallway floor, conscious but groaning. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle. The front door burst open as I reached the bottom of the ladder. Ma'am, we received reports of screaming. Are you all right? 3 officers, hands on their weapons but not drawn. Young faces, concerned expressions. Nothing like Ray's cold calculation. I'm Martha Martinez, I said, holding up the recorder. And I have evidence that Detective Ray Morrison has been murdering women for 8 years. Ray tried to sit up. She's lying. She attacked me. I was investigating. You were trying to kill me with the same poison you used on Margaret Chen and Patricia Edwards and all the others. I hit play on the recorder. Ray's own voice filled the hallway. Asterisk. We eliminated problems. Very discreetly, very profitably. Asterisk. The officers looked at each other, then at Ray, then at me. Ma'am, we're going to need you to start from the beginning. As the paramedics loaded Ray onto a stretcher and the crime scene techs headed up to Harold's secret office, I finally understood something that had been nagging at me. Harold hadn't kept me alive just as cover for his operation. He'd been protecting himself from Ray. The hidden recorder, the detailed files, the confession tape that captured everything Ray had just admitted. Harold had been documenting his partner's crimes as insurance, knowing that eventually Ray might decide Harold was too much of a liability. Harold's paranoia had saved my life. And now, finally, all those murdered women would have justice. Ray Morrison, you are sentenced to 17 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The gavel came down with finality that echoed through the packed courtroom. 6 months after that nightmare in my attic, justice was finally served. I watched Ray's shoulders slump as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. He looked older now, smaller. The confident detective who'd tried to murder me had been replaced by a broken man in an orange jumpsuit. He turned once before they led him away, scanning the courtroom until his eyes found mine. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see that I was still here, still alive, still fighting. Mrs. Martinez? The prosecutor touched my arm gently. Would you like to give your victim impact statement now? I stood on shaky legs. At 78 years old, I never thought I'd be standing in a courtroom talking about my husband's murder spree. But here I was. Your Honor, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. Ray Morrison didn't just kill 17 women. He killed their futures, their dreams, their chance to find real love after loss. I looked at the families scattered throughout the courtroom. Margaret Chen's daughter, Patricia Edwards' sister, Helen Foster's grandson, all of them seeking closure, just like me. Harold Martinez was my husband for 42 years. I cooked his meals, washed his clothes, believed his lies. I thought I knew him. My voice cracked, but I pushed on. What I know now is that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles at you over breakfast. Sometimes it tells you it loves you while planning your death. Ray stared at his hands, but I kept talking. These women trusted Harold because I vouched for him. Because I made him seem safe, normal, loving. I introduced him to some of his victims without knowing it. That guilt will live with me forever. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse. But I also want to read you something. It's from Harold's confession tape, the one his paranoia made him record as insurance against his partner. The courtroom was silent as I unfolded the paper and read Harold's own words. Ray wants to eliminate Martha, but she's too valuable as cover. Besides, after all these years I've grown, fond of her. She's loyal, trusting. Everything our marks are before we destroy them. Sometimes I wonder if I could have loved her, really loved her, if I'd been a different man. I folded the paper back up. Harold saved my life without meaning to. His paranoia about Ray betraying him led him to document everything. And now, because of that evidence, 17 families have answers. The judge nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. Your strength through this ordeal has been remarkable. After the sentencing, I walked outside into the afternoon sunshine. My new apartment was only 6 blocks away, a small place with big windows and neighbors who actually talked to each other. Nothing like the isolated house where Harold kept me trapped for decades. I'd sold that house within a month of Ray's arrest. Couldn't bear to live under that attic anymore. Couldn't sleep in the bed where Harold had lain next to me for years, planning other women's deaths. The real estate agent had been shocked by how quickly I was willing to sell below market value. Mrs. Martinez, you could get at least 50,000 more if you wait. I don't want 50,000 more. I want out. Now I volunteer at the senior center, leading a support group for families of Harold and Ray's victims. Every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we gather in a circle and share our anger, our guilt, our slow journey toward healing. Last week, Margaret Chen's daughter brought photos of her mother's last birthday party. She was so happy, she said through tears. She thought she'd found love again. Patricia Edwards' sister brought her mother's favorite cookies to share. Mom always said Harold had such kind eyes. How could eyes that kind hide such evil? I don't have answers for them. I'm still looking for answers myself. But I do have something I've learned. Survival isn't about being unbroken. It's about refusing to let evil win, even when evil lives in your own home for 42 years. Tonight, like every night, I'll sit in my bright kitchen and have a cup of tea. On the counter is a small wooden box that contains Harold's wedding ring. Not because I love him, that died the moment I saw his victim files, but because I need to remember. Monsters don't always have fangs and claws. Sometimes they have wedding rings and kind smiles and 42 years of shared memories. Sometimes they tell you they love you while planning your funeral. Sometimes they save your life by accident while trying to cover their own tracks. And sometimes, when you're 78 years old and think your story is almost over, You discover you're strong enough to help other people find their way out of the darkness. Harold may have stolen 42 years of my life, but I'm not letting him have the rest.